The sagas speak of them as fearless, unyielding, a tidal wave of conquest crashing upon ancient shores. The Vikings, raiders, warriors, who spread terror from the frozen north to the sun-drenched Mediterranean. They reveled in the screams of their enemies, believing themselves beyond the grasp of fear itself. But history, like the deepest fjords, holds secrets. Secrets of a terror so profound, so unexpected, that it brought even the mightiest Viking warriors to their knees, not by superior armies, but by the will of a single individual. This is the story of Ragna, the Ironheart, not merely a Shield-Maiden among many, but a legend whispered in hushed tones, a specter that haunted the longships and encampments. While other warriors sought glory through brute force, Ragna wielded a different kind of weapon: tactical genius, unwavering ferocity, and a mastery of psychological warfare that turned the Vikings' own tactics against them. She understood their minds, their superstitions, their pride, and she exploited every weakness with surgical precision. Across 25 compelling sections, we will journey into the chilling reality of a force more formidable than any army the Vikings ever faced. We will uncover the unique elements that transformed one woman into an opponent so dreaded. Her very name could turn the tide of battle. From her cunning ambushes in mist-shrouded forests to her audacious defiance on the battlefield, we will explore how Ragna shattered the myth of Viking invincibility. Prepare to witness the true meaning of fear, when even the most formidable conquerors cower before the legend of the Ironheart. Across the vast, fractured landscape of early medieval Europe, one name struck a primordial terror into the hearts of kings and commoners alike: the Vikings. From the late 8th century, with the infamous sacking of Lindisfarne in 793 AD, their longships, those formidable dragon boats, became harbingers of destruction. Sweeping across the North Sea, plunging into rivers, they brought with them a brutal efficiency in warfare. Wielding formidable battle axes and razor-sharp swords, these Norsemen were not merely raiders. They were conquerors, explorers, and, above all, masters of psychological warfare. Their reputation for ferocity, their unwavering resolve in battle, and their seemingly unstoppable advance cemented their image as the apex predators of their age, an unchallengeable force that instilled panic and despair wherever their shadow fell. Yet, even the most hardened warriors, the most stoic conquerors, are not immune to fear. It is a primal instinct, lurking in the deepest recesses of the human mind, waiting for the truly unsettling. For the Vikings, accustomed to facing disorganized militias and terror-stricken peasants, conventional armies rarely stirred their souls. But what if the source of terror was not another army, not a rival king, but something far more insidious? What if it was a force that defied their understanding, their expectations, a shadow that moved with their own ruthlessness, yet turned their tactics against them? Our story delves into this paradox, into the rare instances where even the fearless Norsemen encountered something truly unnerving, something that chipped away at their legendary resolve, setting the stage for a unique kind of dread that would come to define the legend of Ragna. This is the tale of Ragna, the Ironheart, a name that, in whispered tones, came to signify not just a warrior, but a force of nature, a legend forged in the crucible of ceaseless conflict. She was a Shield-Maiden unlike any other, not merely a defender, but a singular, terrifying opponent whose presence on the battlefield struck a fear into the hearts of Vikings that few, if any, armies could ever achieve. What was it about this one woman that could paralyze the legendary Norse warriors, making them question their own courage? Her legend isn't just one of brute strength or martial prowess. It is a profound study in strategic genius, unwavering ferocity, and a chilling mastery of psychological warfare. Ragna's story will challenge everything you thought you knew about Viking terror and about what truly makes a legend. Ragna's world was one under constant siege. Her homeland, the fertile coastal plains and verdant river valleys of what would later become the Kingdom of Eldoria, was a tempting prize for the rapacious Norsemen. These were not grand cities or fortified strongholds, but small, scattered settlements, farming villages, fishing hamlets, and isolated monastic communities. For generations, they had endured the brutal ebb and flow of Viking raids, their lives dictated by the terrifying sight of longships appearing on the horizon. The constant threat bred a unique kind of desperation, a yearning for resistance born not of martial ambition, but of sheer survival. It was within this cauldron of relentless invasion and profound vulnerability that the extraordinary legend of Ragna, the Iron Heart, would unexpectedly rise. Like so many of her generation, Ragna's unique path was not chosen, but forged in the searing heat of personal tragedy. The year was 912 AD. She was but a child when a particularly brutal Viking incursion, led by the infamous Jarl Bjorn the Raven, descended upon her family's homestead in the Fallowdell Valley. The raid left her an orphan, her home reduced to ashes, her innocence shattered. It was a trauma that would forever scar her, but also ignite an unyielding fire within her soul. This profound, indelible loss became the crucible of her resolve, transforming grief into a singular, unwavering commitment to defend her people, to exact a price for every life taken, and to ensure that no other child would endure the terror she had witnessed. Her strength was not born of ambition, but of an absolute, fierce necessity. In a society that rigidly defined gender roles, Ragna defied expectations. While other maidens learned the arts of the loom and the hearth, she sought out a different kind of mastery. Her training was clandestine, unconventional, and brutally demanding. She found an unlikely mentor in old Gunnar, a reclusive former warrior haunted by his own past, living deep in the Serpentwood Forest. Under Gunnar's stern tutelage, Ragna learned not just to wield a sword and shield, but to move silently through the wilds, to track, to endure, and to understand the rhythm of combat. Every sunrise saw her honing her skills, pushing her body and mind to their limits, far removed from the comforts of a village, transforming herself from a traumatized child into a nascent, formidable warrior, driven by an unquenchable thirst for justice. Ragna's legend truly began not with armies, but with a desperate stand. In the harsh winter of 927 AD, a small Viking raiding party, under a minor chieftain named Rolf the Bear, attempted to pillage the isolated hamlet of Stone Shield. Ragna, then barely 18, found herself part of a small, terrified band of villagers, armed with farming tools and a burning desire to protect what little they had left. But Ragna was different. She didn't merely fight. She led, subtly at first. Using her knowledge of the terrain and her raw, untamed skills, she turned the narrow paths and dense woods into a death trap. Her precise, brutal movements and unexpected tactics caught Rolf's warriors off guard. This wasn't a victory of numbers, but of ingenuity, marking her first, indelible step towards becoming the legend that would haunt Viking sagas. From that pivotal first encounter, Ragna understood a crucial truth. Brute strength alone could never truly defeat the relentless Viking tide. The Norsemen had more numbers, better weapons, and generations of raiding experience. True victory lay not in matching their might, but in outthinking it. Ragna's developing tactical genius began to shine. She spent hours studying the patterns of Viking movements, the subtle tells in their formations, and the vulnerabilities inherent in their overconfidence. She learned to exploit the environment, the treacherous bogs, the dense forests, the unpredictable weather, transforming them into her allies. Her mind, sharp and adaptable, became her most potent weapon, turning every skirmish into a learning opportunity and every defeat into a lesson in future triumph. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a strategist, evolving rapidly into a master of the battlefield. As Ragna, the Iron Heart, continued her relentless defense of the northern marches, something unprecedented began to ripple through the longhouses and encampments of the invading Norsemen. These weren't tales of glorious conquests or heroic stands against overwhelming odds, but whispers of inexplicable defeats. Sagas of Viking might had always celebrated courage and victory. Yet here were stories of warriors, seasoned and fearless, returning broken and bewildered, their raiding parties decimated without a clear enemy. Across the frigid fjords of the late 9th century, a new kind of fear was taking root, a subtle, corrosive dread that something unseen, something unnatural, was turning their formidable strength against them. This wasn't the fear of a larger army, but the unsettling anxiety of facing an opponent whose methods defied their understanding of warfare, an enemy who could vanish and strike like a ghost, leaving only ruin. Ragna's effectiveness wasn't just in her ferocity. It lay in her meticulous design, extending even to her choice of arms. Unlike the heavy Dane axes or broadswords favored by Viking berserkers, Ragna's arsenal was an extension of her strategy, speed, precision, and psychological impact. Her primary weapon, Gale Edge, was a light, curved axe, its balance exquisite for swift, disarming strikes, its edge honed to a terrifying keenness. But it was her secondary weapon, a weighted chain, that became truly infamous. Wielded with devastating grace, it could disarm, entangle, or deliver concussive blows, often incapacitating a warrior before a conventional weapon could even be drawn. Each weapon, finely crafted and deceptively simple, was chosen not for raw power, but to exploit the vulnerabilities of heavily armored, often overconfident, Viking opponents, turning their very strength against them. Ragna's true genius, however, lay not just in combat, but in the realm of the mind. She possessed an uncanny, almost anthropological understanding of Viking culture, their beliefs, and their deeply ingrained psychology. She knew their weaknesses, their immense pride, easily wounded, their reliance on omens and superstitions, their ingrained belief in a glorious death in battle, but dread of a humiliating, ignoble end. She understood the power of their sagas and the crushing blow to morale when their perceived invincibility was shattered. Ragna didn't just fight Vikings. She studied them, deconstructed their fears, and meticulously wove this knowledge into every tactic. She knew how to make a Viking warrior question his fate, his gods, and his very purpose, turning their own formidable mental fortitude into a fragile weapon against themselves. Leveraging her understanding of the Viking mind, Ragna became a master of psychological warfare, creating elaborate illusions of overwhelming force. She specialized in the Phantom Army, a chilling tactic that transformed small bands into seemingly insurmountable legions. Using the dense fog of the Skardian peaks or the echoing canyons of the Serpent's Tooth Coast, Ragna's warriors would employ amplified sounds, drums, horns, battle cries, alongside cleverly arranged campfires and exaggerated shadows, making a handful of fighters appear as hundreds. Seasoned jarls like Hroggr the Raven, who prided himself on tactical assessment, found his scouts returning with panicked reports of forces far outnumbering his own, causing doubt and indecision that paved the way for Ragna's decisive, real strikes. The enemy was defeated before a single blade was truly drawn, their will to fight eroded by an unseen, countless foe. Beyond grand illusions, Ragna understood that even the most formidable Viking army was tethered to its logistics. A warrior's might meant little, without a full belly and fresh supplies. Her strategy shifted to starving the beast, focusing surgical, brutal raids on Viking supply lines and foraging parties. Convoys carrying provisions through the narrow passes of the Valheim marches became prime targets for sudden ambushes, their goods destroyed or spirited away. Foraging parties, often small and vulnerable, were systematically decimated. Jarl Sven the Serpent's forces, once accustomed to bountiful plunder, soon faced empty larders and dwindling morale. This wasn't glorious combat, but a slow, debilitating chokehold, forcing desperate measures and eroding the very pride that fueled their conquests. Hunger became Ragna's silent, relentless ally, turning powerful warriors into weakened, frustrated shadows of their former selves. The zenith of Ragna's tactical genius culminated in what would become known as the Battle of the Shadow Pass in the autumn of 878 AD. Jarl Ulfgar the Ruthless, tired of Ragna's persistent harassment, committed his largest force to a decisive engagement. Ragna, however, had chosen her battlefield. She lured Ulfgar's army into a treacherous, narrow gorge, its sheer walls often in perpetual shadow. Her forces, hidden above, triggered preset rock slides and directed torrents of water from dammed streams, turning the pass into a death trap. Caught between crushing stone and a flash flood, Ulfgar's formidable warriors were annihilated, their escape routes blocked, their famed courage rendered useless against the unleashed wrath of the mountain. It was a victory not of brute strength, but of unparalleled cunning, solidifying Ragna's legend and proving that the environment itself could be wielded as her deadliest weapon. Following the devastation of Shadow Pass and countless smaller victories, Ragna began to transcend mere mortal legend. Repeatedly, she escaped from impossible odds, vanishing into the mists when cornered or reappearing to strike where least expected, like a vengeful spirit. Tales of her uncanny ability to survive the unsurvivable spread like wildfire among the Viking ranks. Warriors swore she was protected by dark magic, shielded by the ancient gods, or even a spectral entity herself. Arrows that should have found their mark seemed to deflect. Traps laid for her remained empty. This aura of invincibility, a blend of supernatural belief and Ragna's own preternatural skill, added a terrifying dimension to her legend. Vikings, who faced death without a flinch, now spoke of the Iron Heart in hushed tones, convinced she was more than human, a force against which their steel and courage were utterly meaningless. As Ragna's legend grew, so too did the frustrated obsession of the powerful Viking jarls. The Iron Heart was no longer just an enemy. She was a personal affront, a stain on their honor, an impediment to their destiny. Jarl Ulfgar, enraged by the annihilation at Shadow Pass, swore a blood oath to either capture or kill her, dedicating unprecedented resources to her pursuit. Fleets scoured the coasts, war parties combed the forests, and bounties beyond imagination were offered for her head. Yet, Ragna remained elusive, a mocking shadow always one step ahead. This desperate, relentless hunt consumed the Jarls, diverting their attention and forces from other conquests, eroding their resources, and further cementing Ragna's unique status. She had become their singular, most dreaded opponent, not through the might of an army, but by instilling a terror that ran deeper than any blade, turning Viking ambition into a maddening, fruitless obsession. Ragna, the Ironheart, was not a solitary warrior operating in a vacuum. Her unprecedented success against the seemingly endless tide of Norsemen was underpinned by an intricate, sprawling web of intelligence. Throughout the embattled lands of the north, she meticulously cultivated a network of loyalists, farmers, fishermen, even displaced traders, all bound by a shared, burning hatred for the invaders. These were Ragna's eyes and ears, silently relaying movements, numbers, and weaknesses of Viking encampments and raiding parties. From the bustling market squares of Haraldsvik to the isolated homesteads nestled deep within the forests of Eldoria, whispers became crucial intelligence. This clandestine flow of information allowed Ragna to anticipate, to outmaneuver, and to strike with devastating precision, transforming the scattered resistance into a cohesive, deadly force, unseen until it was too late. Beyond her strategic brilliance, Ragna was a force of nature in direct combat, a whirling storm of steel and unyielding will. While others might plan from afar, the Iron Heart led from the front, her battle cry echoing across the valleys. Eyewitness accounts from the infamous Bloody Pass of Skallagrim detail her cutting down 3 seasoned Viking warriors in quick succession, her movements a blur of controlled ferocity. Her shield, often scarred and dented, became an extension of her unyielding resolve, deflecting blows with brutal efficiency before her axe found its mark. She was not just a symbol, she was the spearhead. Her presence alone, a beacon of defiant fury, could galvanize her warriors and instill a chilling dread in her enemies, turning what seemed like inevitable defeat into a tide-shifting victory. The berserkers, often cloaked in animal skins and driven into a trance-like fury, were the Norsemen's most terrifying weapon. They were considered unstoppable, immune to pain and fear. Yet, even these titans of battle found their will shattered when confronting Ragna. It was not merely physical defeat, but a profound psychological dismantling. The sagas whisper of the Beast of Fenris, a berserker of immense stature, who, after a prolonged, brutal duel with Ragna at the Battle of Frostfall Ridge, simply stopped fighting, dropping his axe and staring at her with an expression of utter, broken bewilderment. He had faced death countless times, but never an opponent whose defiance burned brighter than his own rage. Ragna, it seemed, was immune to their terror, an embodiment of an even deeper, more primal force that could extinguish even a berserker's fire. Yet, beneath the legend of the Iron Heart, lay the very human cost of endless war. The weight of her shield was more than just steel and wood. It was the burden of constant vigilance, the sacrifice of personal solace, and the ever-present shadow of loss. Nights were rarely for rest, often spent poring over maps, planning defenses, or simply staring into the cold embers of a dying fire, haunted by the faces of those she could not save. There was no family hearth for Ragna, no comforting embrace. Her path was one of profound loneliness, a desolate journey marked by grim resolve. Every victory was tinged with the awareness of the next inevitable struggle, forging her into a formidable icon. But the cost of the quiet joys and simple humanity she might have once known. As Ragna's legend grew, it transcended mere martial prowess, intertwining with the very fabric of Norse superstition and local folklore. For the Vikings, accustomed to interpreting every unusual event as a sign from the gods, Ragna became an ominous harbinger. Whispers spread of her being a vengeful spirit, a Valkyrie who had abandoned Valhalla to punish the unjust, or even a witch cursed by Odin himself. Storms over her territories were attributed to her wrath, failed raids to her unholy luck. Jarl Grimfang, a veteran raider, reportedly diverted his fleet after a flock of ravens, a symbol often associated with Odin, unexpectedly veered sharply away from Ragna's lands. This potent blend of fear and superstition began to paralyze the Norsemen, turning a formidable human opponent into an existential, supernatural threat. The ultimate validation of Ragna's terrifying influence was the tangible shift in Viking behavior. Longships, once symbols of unstoppable conquest, began actively avoiding her protected territories. The rich coastal settlements of the Skjold Fjord, once prime targets for plunder, now stood largely untouched, bypassed by fleets charting cautious, longer routes around the Ironheart's domain. Maps from the period, painstakingly recreated, reveal stark diversions, routes bending unnaturally around areas known to be under Ragna's protection, costing the Norsemen precious time, resources, and raiding opportunities. This was not a tactical retreat in battle. It was a strategic capitulation to fear itself, an unspoken admission that facing Ragna was a risk too great, an omen too dark, even for the most audacious Viking warlord. Ragna's impact extended far beyond the borders of her immediate domain. Her legend, carried by whispering winds and brave messengers, became a potent spark of resistance across the subjugated lands. Communities that had long suffered in silence, resigned to Viking dominance, began to stir. The tales of the Ironheart's victories against overwhelming odds ignited a forgotten flame of hope and defiance. From the small fishing villages of the western fjords to the nascent hill fort kingdoms further inland, people began to organize, to fortify, and to fight back, drawing courage from Ragna's example. She was not just protecting her own. She was forging a new spirit of unified resistance, transforming scattered despair into a burgeoning, coordinated will to survive and reclaim their lands, challenging the very notion of Viking invincibility. Ultimately, the fear Ragna instilled in the Vikings transcended the simple dread of death in battle. It was a profound, existential terror, striking at the very core of their identity. These were warriors who prided themselves on their courage, their ferocity, their unchallenged masculinity in conquest. To be outmaneuvered, outfought, and ultimately avoided by a single Shield-Maiden was an incomprehensible shame, a shattering blow to their cultural narrative. It was the fear of losing their reputation, their sagas, their very claim to being the unconquerable. Ragna didn't just defeat their armies, she defeated their ideals. She forced them to confront an enemy that defied all their expectations, making them question everything they believed about strength, honor, and fear itself. This was the true nature of the fear Ragna, the iron heart, instilled, a dread that gnawed at their souls, long after the echoes of battle had faded. The sagas of Ragna, the iron heart, may be woven from the intricate threads of historical fact and the vibrant tapestry of legend. Whether she was a singular, terrifying force, or a powerful composite of many fierce shield-maidens whose deeds coalesced into one formidable figure, her impact echoes through time, irrevocably challenging the very notion of Viking invincibility. Her story is more than a chronicle of battles won. It is a profound testament to the enduring human capacity for unparalleled courage, for ingenious cunning, and for unwavering resistance against seemingly overwhelming odds. She didn't just defeat armies. She conquered the very spirit of her enemies, instilling a primal fear that resonated long after her acts fell silent. Ragna reminds us that true power isn't merely found in brute strength, but in the strategic mind, the unyielding will, and the ability to turn the very concept of fear into one's most potent weapon. Her legend serves as an eternal beacon, illustrating how one individual can transcend the battlefield and etch their name into the annals of terror and triumph forever. Ragna, the Iron Heart, was more than a warrior. She was a force of nature, a legend carved not just in blood and steel, but in the psyche of an era. Her profound impact stemmed from a unique alchemy, the strategic brilliance to outmaneuver, the unyielding ferocity to outfight, and the psychological mastery to break the spirits of those accustomed to breaking others. Her legacy is a powerful testament to the fact that true dominance isn't merely about superior numbers or brute strength, but about a superior will and an intellect sharp enough to perceive and exploit the deepest fears of any adversary. She embodied the ultimate counter to Viking supremacy, demonstrating that courage isn't merely the absence of fear, but the unwavering pursuit of purpose in its presence. Ragna's story transcends the battlefield, offering an enduring symbol of resistance and the extraordinary power of individual ingenuity against seemingly overwhelming odds. Her legend echoes through time, reminding us how one extraordinary individual can forge a narrative so potent, so terrifying, that even the fiercest warriors tremble at the whisper of her name. In the annals of history, Ragna stands as a beacon, proving that even conquerors can be conquered by the specter of fear itself.